studied this term. I would be hard pressed to say that any of them would defend this normative claim. All right? And isn't that interesting? I'm not sure if I would, I don't know. I don't know myself. I don't know. And you want your professors not to have big metaphysical commitments. So I'm happy to tell all of you that my mind is still fresh and I'm just beginning to try to understand these kinds of questions, and I don't have any answers myself. I just see where these different points of view are making legitimate contributions to the debate. And I want to highlight those, right? Those legitimate and then leave it up to you. Yeah.
So I like to think outside of the box. What if Harambe was a pile of quicksand? That's pretty much what happened. The boy went into the thing, and the gorilla didn't attack. He didn't go out of his, it was just the boy going into quicksand. Would we ever think about destroying or trying to kill a pile of quicksand?
Well, the example I like to use sometimes when I compare the marauding bear in Yellowstone with the human the tweaker human who wants to steal the fancy camera versus the bear who just wants to steal the smoked salmon, just doing what he's doing, right? What was your example again now?
Quicksand.
The quicksand. Yeah, I just like to compare a boulder that happens to have slid down a little bit after a heavy rainstorm, and now it's teetering right on the edge of a cliff. And below that is a busy freeway, right? We're not going to attribute any moral status or moral culpability at all to the movements of the boulder. We're simply going to go up there. In the same way, we're going to eliminate the bear, right? Now, in this case, he wasn't an endling. There are several hundred other captive lowland gorillas, and then there are a couple thousand left in the wild too, right? Their numbers are shrinking really quickly, right? So we wouldn't count on that. But there are others, a couple hundred also left in zoos, right? So we're not facing that kind of an extreme situation, and maybe the decision is easier, right? But if we were facing that kind of extreme situation where we're talking about just a few that are left, right? What if this is Martha? Imagine Martha, the passenger pigeon, just attacking that little boy, pecking his eyeballs out, right? I hate those humans, and before I die and my species goes extinct, I'm going to attack that little boy, right? Then, of course, we blast away and we kill poor Martha, right? Anyway.
So what if
I have a wild imagination.
Well, so do I. What if it was a 17-year-old boy going after a 4-year-old baby bear? Would they have still shot? Well, big gorilla.
No, we wouldn't have.
You know?
It was of course not.
17-year-old kid going in there into Harambe's pen specifically to harass Harambe.
Mm-hmm.
Would they?
And then Harambe was going after him, saying, "All right, man, I'll show you who's boss."
Protecting his environment. If Harambe is protecting his environment and somebody invades that
yes, then there's greater moral culpability on the part of the invader, huh?
Yeah.
And that needs to be considered too at that point. But I suspect, what's empirically the answer? What practically would be the answer? If it was just some crazy drunken teenager stumbling around and throwing things at poor Harambe, and then Harambe started going up and grabbing him by the shoulders and shaking him or something,
They still probably would have shot him.
They would have saved the human, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense. And
Well, it does actually.
Yeah. Well, I probably would have followed up by charging a human with something.
Yeah.
And as it just happened this weekend, we don't know if the parents are going to have any repercussions from their actions.
Wasn't a child an invader? I don't see the difference between a 17-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. If he really went into the pit he knew what he was doing, he went in there because he wanted to swim. He invaded, he knew that.
But surely adulthood carries greater moral responsibility for one's decisions than juvenile, right? I mean, what if it was Donald Trump, just completely nuts, just narcissistic, I'll prove to the world that gorilla loves me, and he just goes staggering in there.
So my question is, what responsibility does what are we going to do to the parents? We throw them in jail? What are we got to do?
Let's throw them with Trump in the gorilla cage. No,
I'm down for that.
I just say Trump in the cage.
We got to do something to those.
No, let's just.
They can't do something. like.
We should reintroduce grizzly bears to Wall Street. Their original, part of their original habitat. Just let them run, you know, let them eat, prey upon the bankers. Right? No, obviously we can't do anything like that. And obviously those remarks are made tongue-in-cheek. And I just got through pointing out that I don't see how any of the thinkers we've read would defend allowing severe injury or death. And I don't know what that means. Maybe we haven't read the radical thinkers yet. Maybe we just haven't read enough radical thinkers. Maybe there are some out there that I've neglected that you need to go study. But among the most radical ones that we've studied, none of them would defend this normative claim. Yeah.
I can't
Andrew,
place
and then
this may have already been covered, but this, like, Harambe was killed because they thought that, like, was it just because?
One thing you missed was we're not going to get bogged down in discussions of facts. I made that very clear at the outset. That you did miss that. But go ahead, real quickly.
Okay. Did they think that Harambe was a threat to save other people at the zoo?
Maybe. Philosophers only care about facts if we can immediately, quickly, without any hesitation, explain why those particular facts are relevant to our normative theory. All right, that's the only time we care about facts in an ethics class. All right. So, and broadly speaking, consequentialists care about facts because facts give us that, you know, chain of consequences that we have to think about when we make our decisions. Right. That chain of consequences is crucial to our test of right and wrong. Right? And then if we're non-consequentialists, typically we rely on facts the way that a thinker like Rolston relies on facts. He has a very detailed, or a thinker like Uncle Leopold himself, right? Very detailed mind, attention, you know, very, very close attention to detail and to scientific evidence, right? But using all of that primarily just to throw a light on the awesomeness, right? Which throws a light on the moral status, they think, right? When Rolston throws a light on the awesomeness of that millions and millions of year-old story about the evolutionary adaptation of that species to its environment, by throwing that light on all those facts, he's not really trying to make a consequentialist argument about what we should do, right? He's just trying to say, you need to stop and pause and respect all of that, because that's an incredible story, right? So anyway, unless you can show how our facts are relevant, then you should be suspicious of your own move, really. Because what you might be doing is you might be smuggling in your normative theory and your whole normative conclusion quietly in the dark of night amidst this swarm of facts, right? Which as philosophers, we want to be careful of that. You know, we want to announce for the world to see what our normative guidelines are, right? And if we're caught up in a swarm of facts, then typically we've lost sight of what we're really trying to do as moral philosophers, all right? Right, my goodness, we get caught up in so much of these different things, you know. And I don't know if we'll even get to talk about the Snake River at all today. And I think, you know, Thursday is going to be an adumbrated class. That means a shortened class, because I want to leave you guys time to meet with your groups. We need to talk more about our final project on Thursday, and we need to do our course evaluations too on Thursday. So I think what we'll do on Thursday is we'll only take about an hour and 15 minutes or so for lecture, and I'll make my concluding remarks and kind of wrap up the term and summarize things and allow for, you know, comments from anybody, and then we'll do our course evaluations, and I'll have to be gone for that, right? And then you guys will still have time left over to break up into groups. And then you'll have to set up further meetings on your own, okay? But for today, I want to use the time after we come back from break to go into greater depth on social ecology and ecofeminism, which was our subject for it. And we just keep going. I don't understand professors who just kind of figure the last week is just a throwaway week, you know. I've had students just express shock to me. I know none of you guys would do this, but I've had students express shock that I was even meeting, that my class was even meeting on week 10. Isn't that silly? I mean, anyway. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, would it have been more morally equal or right if they would have made the parents kill Harambe?
You know, if I was there, I don't know. No, I wouldn't have done this. Then I would have been crazy. I would have been the crazy dad. I was gonna say, if I was there, I would have tried to go in the cage with my kid, you know, and somehow talk reasonably, or, you know, somehow distract. I don't know. But then as soon as I started doing that, I would think, well, that's stupid, and I should let these experts decide. They know a lot more about this animal's behavior than I do. And so then I would end up just being ushered away into some waiting room. And, right. That's what would happen to me. I mean, you know, but what was your question again?
Would it have been more morally acceptable, I guess, if
the parents, yeah.
yeah, if the experts made the parents shoot Harambe?
If the experts made the parents,
I don't think so.
would it have been more morally?
I don't think that would create a situation of defense, really.
How about this? What, you know, presumably there were people who worked in the zoo who had a personal relationship with Harambe, right? I'm sure there were. And so I'm sure there were people in the zoo whose moral perspective was somewhat different because of that. That's important, right? That counts. That's morally relevant, that you have a relationship with this, right? You have an individual personal relationship. This is not just some anonymous chimpanzee from a laboratory that you don't even know, right? This is somebody. So it's fair to say that that person who enjoyed that personal relationship with this gorilla would would defend a different point of view, right? There would be different things that were morally important, relevant to that person who enjoys that friendship, right? So, you know, it's just interesting, and there aren't any answers. What we try to do is sketch the outlines of these different broad narratives that give us a clue to the answer, right? And then you'll find yourself occupying one of these broad narratives, right? As you work your way through life, you'll find yourself occupying. That's the value of studying moral philosophy, right? If we didn't study moral philosophy and all we did was go around debating consequences based on scientific evidence, guess what? We'd be in a hopelessly confused society about what we ought to do. And guess what? We are. We're in a hopelessly confused society because we're in a society that's reliant, that just assumes without any critical evaluation that we can make our most profound moral decisions on the basis of an analysis of consequences. And guess what? People who rely on science to resolve their moral struggles are nihilists. They just are. Have you noticed that? Because in the end, they throw up their hands and say, well, you're entitled to your opinion, right? You can use the facts to defend any kind of normative conclusion, depending on how far you've traveled down what Kant calls that, you know, the serpent windings of utilitarian, right? Depending on how much you've accepted the status quo, you can use the facts to defend all kinds of natural resource policy guidelines, right? Including, you can use the facts to defend the normative claim that we are morally obligated to fully instrumentalize Snake River water resources, right? That's a big challenge for environmentalists, right? Because of what climate scientists are telling us about Earth's climate systems. We are morally obligated to extract as much hydropower from the Snake River watershed. That means not only keep the 4 lower Snake dams in place, it means, if you can, get more power out of them, raise them up if you can, if that's going to make them higher if you can, and build more dams. Isn't there a whole bunch of space up there to build more dams, right? Where is our... Anyway. Right, that's right. Total instrumentalization of the Snake River as a means of preventing irreversible harm to Earth's climate system. I'm telling you, you could write this up, and you could either defend or oppose this claim, right? Yes, we should fully instrumentalize Snake River water resources because we have to, right? Because if we don't, then we are going to emit too many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and that's going to be catastrophic for Earth's climate systems, right? So, and those Earth's climate systems are more important, right? Because they're more comprehensive, right? If we want to kind of stretch Tom Regan's language a little bit, we could think of Earth's climate systems as being ecological wholes. Who would be made worse off, right? If we're going to ask which of these two should we sacrifice? Should we sacrifice the ecological whole of Snake River salmon lineages, Snake River salmon runs, Snake River water, the whole riverine ecosystems of the Snake River, right? Well, if we think, that the Earth is going to be worse, Earth's climate system, Earth as a whole is going to be worse off, then we might agree, right? Well, we might defend the claim that yes, we need to fully instrumentalize Snake River watershed resources in order to prevent greater harm, right, to Earth's, right, which would manifest in the form of damage to Earth's climate systems, right? So applying Tom Regan's lifeboat example and his worse off principle, we might well conclude with some neo-Kantians that we are obligated. Forget about, that's it, man. You had that internship lined up with Save Our Wild Salmon, right? You had that internship lined up with that environmental group and you were going to go door to door this summer, weren't you? To argue for removal of the 4 lower snake dams. Now as a good environmentalist, a good consequentialist, thinking about the consequences to Earth as a whole, you're going to have to call up your employer and say, sorry, I'm not going to do that because it goes against my moral principles. Yes?
I've been thinking about this, and by taking that approach, wouldn't you actually give the Earth's climate system some moral claim? Because you're saying that, if we keep doing this...
Of course you are, yeah. But you're just, you're not giving them any direct moral claim, no. I mean, you might be, sure. Look, you are if you're a neo-Kantian, right? That's the whole idea. If you're a neo-Kantian, yes, then the moral problem, the moral struggle you face is between two entities, two ecological wholes, each of which has moral status. And boom, as soon as you have it, like with Regan's subject of a life, boom, you just have it. In equal amounts, right? And so, if they're both ecological wholes that have moral status, they have it in equal amounts. So what do we do when they're in conflict with each other, right? That's where we can turn to Tom Regan's worse off principle, perhaps, and point out that, well, this one ecological whole, this one entity with moral status, is going to be made a lot worse off, right, than this other one, right? Unless we sacrifice this other one, right? And so that's why we have to sacrifice this other one, the Snake River salmon. Right? That's why we have to sacrifice the ecological whole of Snake River salmon. Because that's the only way that we're going to get to saving the larger ecological whole of Earth's climate systems. Okay? That's the argument. And I'm just pointing out. Now, if you're now this is where I want to go with this, okay? Where I'm hoping this is maybe where you want to go too, Tyler. Is that the response to that is that, this is really crucial, guys. This really goes to the heart. And this is totally futuristic, too. Nobody else is doing this kind of work, right? As far as I can tell. I mean, then you guys help me. I'm not taking credit for it. You guys are the one who put this in stark outline. But this in stark outline is the resource management choice that we as citizens, if we are still living in some kind of democracy where the people have control over natural resource policy, this is what we have to give our input to. Responding to this kind of conflict, right? Now, the question though is whether or not this moral struggle is more analogous to Regan's lifeboat example, or more analogous to the contrasting example that I introduced when we talked about Regan. That was that chimp to human heart transplant. And remember, my point in introducing that chimp to human heart transplant example was to show that a stringent and really a thoroughgoing and consistent and radical interpretation of what Regan's saying is that you cannot simply, any time you recognize a human life being saved, justify it, say that's okay. Like in the case of the chimp to human heart transplant. Yeah, your Uncle Dave, you know, he's got this heart condition, and he's just going to die in about 6 weeks unless he gets that chimp to human heart transplant. And if he gets that chimp to human heart transplant, we know, because medical science has evolved so much lately, that we know that he's going to live another 20 years. They're going to be productive, positive, healthy, happy 20 years of life, right? A more stringent reading of what Regan's normative theory is that the heart transplant in such a case is not allowed because the alternative does not involve instrumentalization of an entity with moral status. Okay, you guys get all that, right? I'm summarizing this quickly because we went over this already in some detail. Okay? Right? With a lifeboat, you have no alternative. The only alternative to instrumentalizing the dog by throwing him overboard is to instrumentalize one of the humans by throwing one of the humans overboard, right? You have to instrumentalize one of those entities, right? That's why when push comes to shove in a really difficult situation like that, Regan, because of his worse off principle, he defends the decision to throw the dog overboard, right? So if we're really facing a situation like that, then we have to throw snake, river, salmon overboard, right? We have to throw them overboard. If the example we're looking at is analogous to Regan's lifeboat example. So now we have to ask, is the alternative to stripping out the 4 lower snake dams and working hard to ensure the long-term survival and viability of snake river salmon runs, is the alternative to that policy course? Does the alternative to that policy course necessarily involve the instrumentalization of another ecological whole? Yes or no? Ben?
Well, I was just about to say, based on that, doesn't this create a false dilemma?
It does, because we're saying that some kind of vital human needs are at stake either way. And in this case, my point here, and then we'll take our break, all right? My point is that, and this is the kind of thing I'm hoping that you guys will talk about when you break off into your groups over the weekend and prepare for your final presentations on Thursday. Okay, and by the way, I'll send out a breakdown of exactly how, what I envision is a 10-minute executive summary from each side, all right? And then more in-depth argumentation with chances to respond. So I envision our 2 hours and 15 minutes of our final exam period being taken up by maybe 15 minutes, again, you know, explaining why the dam removal crowd want, right? It's the 10-minute executive summary of the environmentalist argument, and then a 10-minute executive summary of the status quo argument, and then more in-depth argument from the environmentalist, and then response, and then response. And, okay, that's kind of how I envision it. And so I'll send that out tomorrow, and then Thursday we'll be prepared by the end of Thursday to break out, to start, use the last part of class on Thursday to meet one another and to begin organizing your participation in the final project if you're choosing to do so. So far we have about 15 people who are doing the written option. But yeah, real quick.
So the problem I have with this is, doesn't this kind of say that, oh, Earth didn't have moral obligations before it wasn't endangered, but now that it's endangered, it does, we have, like, it has moral rights, or like we have a moral obligation to save it now? I don't get it. It's like saying that it didn't have moral right, or we didn't have a moral obligation before.
No, just like, look, the Reganite admits right up front that in that lifeboat example, the dog and the humans all have equal amounts of moral status because they're all subjects of a life, period. Okay? So,
but by saying that we have to...
That's the hallmark of the deontological analysis of ecological wholes, right? The Rollstonian, the holistic, ecocentrist, neo-Kantian, Rollstonian ecocentrist, right? Right? That axiology, right? The axiological orientation itself is that some more than human whole entities, like ecological wholes, species. I try not to make the list too broad, right? I mean, it's a fairly narrow list. I mean, what are ecological wholes? Species, they have to be, right? They're part of the whole cycle of, generations. you know, right? I mean, and then you can't just, and then wildlife populations are ecological wholes, and then ecosystems, climate systems. Anyway, for a resource manager who approaches resource management decisions from a holistic point of view and from a deontological point of view, then the focus, how we decide what we're going to do is we're going to follow this something like what Regan offers us when he's talking about, right, a resource manager struggling between, in situations where both a non-human entity, a non-human individual and a human individual have something vitally at stake, right? And he doesn't, I don't think Regan wants to defend the claim that whenever we can prove that something is vitally at stake, we're therefore entitled to harvest that animal, right? Remember I suggested that, look, if you talk about this class and what you learned at your Thanksgiving table, you know, your traditional-minded family members, your Aunt Matilda and your Uncle Charlie or whoever, they're going to be appalled that when you explain to them, well, I learned about this resource management philosophy that says that in some situations where even if we can save a human life by harvesting some non-humans, we should just go ahead and let the humans die, right? That sounds terrible, right? I mean, who would defend that? And it seems counter-enlightenment, right? Isn't the whole point of thinking and doing research and trying to figure out what's right? Isn't the whole point of all that to improve human life? And so if your Uncle Dave can get 20 years of new life by taking the life of a chimpanzee, why would anyone around the Thanksgiving dinner table suggest that's morally wrong? Right? How could anyone suggest that that's morally wrong, that Dave would be committing a grave moral harm? Right? But that's what Regan is saying. You're committing a grave moral harm when, except in those very, 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 very rare situations, like the lifeboat example, you have no choice. Someone's got to be instrumentalized, right? Just saying that you can save a life, you can save a human life, if you instrumentalize this other life, this non-human life. That's not enough, right? For the deontologist, that's not enough, because the test is whether or not an entity that has moral status is being instrumentalized, right? And unless you can show that that's going to happen either way, then you're not in a lifeboat situation, okay? And you're not going to have that kind of anthropocentric defense that the lifeboat situation might offer you. All right. So we spent way too much time on this, on both poor Harambe and the little boy who remains unidentified. But hopefully he'll get counseling when he gets older and realizes.
His parents are idiots.
Well, he can forgive his parents too. He'll have to. Maybe he needs counseling for that too. But pretty sensitive organisms, these humans, you know, I hope he gets some counseling. I wouldn't want to grow up with the burden of that. You know, I want to be able to talk to somebody about it. Hopefully they won't just ignore it, brush it under the carpet or something. But anyway, so do you guys want to take a break, or do you just guys want to keep, let's just take a break, because I know some of you have to. So let's come back in 3 or 4 minutes, all right? And we'll talk more about social ecology and ecofeminism. Yeah. That's one of them, yeah. I think there's one on each side. There's another one over here, I think. That's probably it there. But yeah, this is one of them. So this is 84 going east right here. That long line that I was telling you about, it's down in here. If you look down, this photograph's, I don't know how old this is. Maybe this is, no, that's the Deschutes right there. No, the Deschutes coming down? No, the Deschutes come down up here. Anyway, but if you look down, I think Lone Pine is right about down in there. Just a cluster of RV. They were definitely right. I can't see anything like that around here. Yeah, that's the Oregon side, right? And isn't this Horse Thief Lake right here? If you go across the Bridge of the Gods, here's Horse Thief Lake State Park.
That's not the Bridge of the Gods. Bridge of the Gods is more towards.
Oh, you're right, no, that's just the Dalles Bridge, huh? But anyway, if you go across like that, there's that Horse-Thief Lake State Park. I think it's actually in here, and that's where they have a bunch of petroglyphs that were hurriedly rescued from the gorge. Right? Hundreds and hundreds of petroglyphs that they were just going to be flooded forever. You know? So these archaeologists came and for a long time they were stored. I forget where. I think they were stored at
There we go, perfect.
at Bonneville Dam or something. And then the tribes got them back, and now they're on this ledge near the parking lot. And that's also where you can go and see there's an original petroglyph on the rocks there too. But that's all fenced off. You have to go on a tour to see that. But yeah, that's a really cool thing to do if you take a field trip around this way, is to go across to Horse-Thief Lake State Park and take a look at those petroglyphs. It's really pretty amazing.
My destination was so
Yeah, real quickly, get that.
Okay, you said that I can send you an email for the revised version of the paper. Can I send you that email tonight?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It is not complete yet. It is mostly complete, but it's not complete yet.
Keep the dam.
All right. Yeah, right down in here was that lone pine. I'm not sure how old this photograph is, but this is all the Dalles. I think this is that shopping center, isn't it, when you come on I-84? Anyway, doesn't matter. And we got a whole bunch of stuff to go through. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. So we really didn't spend a lot of time talking about David Watson, but he gives us a useful distinction between different levels of technological comprehensiveness that a culture might have. And our culture is characterized by a technological mega machine. So we're just technology, just ramped out all the way. And what he means by this is a total system, all right? Total system homogenized by Baconian science does not vary from culture to culture. So, whereas something like that is technique. Okay? We don't want that. Procedural instrumentality or manner in which something is done by all human society is not identical, varies from culture to culture. And then I'm comfortable saying that this now is kind of an intermediate stage. If we want to apply Watson's typology, then this I would characterize as an example of what Watson would call technical operations using tools or machines, not identical, shaped by culture. Now I struggled a little bit. Maybe that fish wheel is an example of full-fledged technology. Maybe there isn't something in between Celilo Falls and a fish wheel. But anyway, we do know that this would be an example. These giant hydropower dams are excellent examples of what Watson calls technology. All right, in this highly specialized, we use our language carefully, right? As philosophers, we always use our terms very carefully.